China is gearing up for an invasion of Taiwan. That was the stark warning delivered by US Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth in Singapore on May 31st as he made a keynote speech during the 2025 IISS Shangri-La Dialogue. Make no mistake about it, Hegseth is sounding the alarm. A Chinese invasion of Taiwan could be imminent. On Saturday, Hegseth joined many of his equivalent defense ministers from countries within the Indo-Pacific and Europe to deliver a keynote address on the state of the Indo-Pacific region. The US Defense Secretary used this opportunity to do two things: warn that China is planning to invade Taiwan and reassure America's Indo-Pacific partners that the US is ready to stand beside them when China transitions from building its military to actively using it. A report from AP News says that, according to Hegseth, the Chinese military is rehearsing for the real deal during the military drills it's been conducting around Taiwan over the last few years. "We are not going to sugarcoat it. The threat China poses is real," Hegseth said, "and it could be imminent." Hegseth added that China has moved away from building up its military forces in preparation for a fight with Taiwan. Now it's entered a new phase. The buildup is complete. China is now actively training for it every day when it comes to invading Taiwan. US Defense Secretary pointed to several exercises China has conducted in recent months that he believes were designed to emulate what a naval security blockade around Taiwan would look like. He was also quick to point out that the US has pledged to defend Taiwan, which is a self-governing island that technically isn't even formally recognized as a sovereign nation by the United States. Beijing is furious. In the wake of Hegseth's comments, China accused the US of trying to raise tensions in the Indo-Pacific. The Guardian reports that China responded by accusing Hegseth of attempting to sow division within Asia, seeming in an attempt to quell any rumors that a Taiwan invasion is imminent. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs released a statement on June 1st claiming that Hegseth's speech was filled with provocations and intended to sow division. It was also inaccurate, Beijing said. Hegseth deliberately ignored the call for peace and development by countries in the region, China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said, and instead touted the Cold War mentality for bloc confrontation, vilified China with defamatory allegations, and falsely called China a threat. The ministry also pushed back at claims Hegseth made that China is attempting to become a hegemonic power in the Indo-Pacific. "No country in the world deserves to be called a hegemonic power other than the US itself," the ministry roared, who is also the primary factor undermining the peace and stability in the Asia-Pacific. The ministry capped its statement off with a simple sentence: "China deplores and firmly opposes them and has protested strongly to the US," it concluded when speaking about Hegseth's remarks. China's fiery response was indicative of a conference where tensions between the US and China were clear from the off. In addition to the Chinese ministry's response, the vice president of China's National Defense University, Rear Admiral Hu Gangfeng, outright accused Hegseth of lying. "Some of the claims are completely fabricated, some distort facts, and some are cases of a thief crying, 'Stop thief,'" Gangfeng said at the conference, though he didn't provide any specific examples of the lies he claims Hegseth told. Gangfeng mirrored his country's ministry when speaking about the impact of the US Defense Secretary's statements. "These actions are nothing more than attempts to provoke trouble, incite division, and stir up confrontation to destabilize the Asia-Pacific region." It's also notable that China made the strange decision to send a lower-level delegation to the ISS Shangri-La Dialogue than it normally sends. AP News says that China's defense minister, Dong Jun, would normally attend such events. However, he chose not to in 2025. Likely as a direct snub of US President Donald Trump and his inflammatory tariff war with China. Hegseth pointed that out during the conference, stating, "We are here this morning and somebody else isn't." He also used that fact to reinforce that the US is fully committed to protecting all of its allies in the Indo-Pacific, adding, "We're opening our arms to countries across the spectrum, traditional allies, non-traditional allies." There's more. Hegseth didn't stop at accusing China of gearing up for an imminent invasion of Taiwan. He also rallied against the US adversary's actions in Latin America. AP News added that Hegseth noted that he believes China is trying to increase its influence over the Panama Canal, likely as an attempt to disrupt the 5% of global trade, which includes 40% of the US's total container traffic, according to the International Institute for Strategic Studies that flows through the canal each year. The only counter to this increased Chinese aggression, Hegseth claimed, is that "we must all do our part." The US Defense Secretary urged those at the conference to raise their defense spending to 5% of their gross domestic product, or GDP, in comments that mirror similar claims the US has made about its European allies, increasing their defense spending. Still, the headline here is that Hegseth has just called out China for preparing to invade Taiwan. China says it isn't doing it. However, the evidence seems to be in Hegseth's favor. Take the military drills Hegseth mentioned in his speech as an example. In its report on the comments, NBC News noted that Chinese forces have been staging regular drills around Taiwan for years. with the use of force not having been ruled out by the People's Liberation Army. One of the most recent of those drills occurred on April 1st. Al Jazeera reports that they highlighted the increased aggression China is displaying toward Taiwan. Those drills were intended to serve as a warning to Taiwan's government, Al Jazeera reports, with a special mention of the supposed separatist forces within Taiwan that China hopes to deter. The drills were massive. Le Monde reported on April 1st that Taiwan detected 21 Chinese warships and at least 71 aircraft encircling the island during the Chinese drill. The event also marked one of the first times that China has combined all of the major arms of its military to operate inside or close to Taiwanese waters. Units from the Chinese Army, Air Force, Navy, and Rocket Force worked in tandem. Taiwan responded, of course, sent its own ships and aircraft to monitor the drill, in addition to preparing land-based missile systems just in case the drill evolved into a full-blown assault. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But what's most remarkable about this drill, beyond its sheer size, is the rhetoric accompanying it. When announcing the drills, China released a short animated propaganda video in which it described Taiwan's president, Lai Ching-te, as a parasite poisoning Taiwan. The animation even showcases Lai being held to a fire using a pair of chopsticks. This video marks a change in approach by China, which has previously talked about how Chinese and Taiwanese are one people. Now Beijing is much more aggressive. The video demonstrates that China views Taiwan's relatively new president as a threat, and it wants to color Taiwanese opinion against him as much as possible. While the April 1st drills, which saw China conduct the encircling of Taiwan that Hegseth described, are perhaps the headline example of how China is preparing to invade, they also aren't the only hints we have. Take the sheer number of aircraft that China has been sending into Taiwanese airspace as another example. On March 10th, Janes reported that China dramatically ramped up the number of planes it sent into Taiwanese airspace during the latter half of 2024, leading to it breaking its record. In 2024 alone, the PLA conducted 3,615 flights into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. That's more than double the 1,669 flights it recorded in 2023, as well as being higher than the 1,597 aircraft detected in 2022, and over 3 times as much as the 972 aircraft tracked in 2021. What we see here is a trend. Over the last 4 years, China has been growing more confident about sending its aircraft into Taiwan's ADIZ. It knows that there will be no response that can stop it from doing so. Taiwan may scramble its own jets, but it won't start a fight directly. With each passing year, China increases the scale of its threats to put Taiwan on edge. And if 2025 is any indication, China may break its Taiwanese ADIZ record again. During the first 2 months of 2025 alone, China flew 739 aircraft into Taiwan's ADIZ. Assuming Beijing keeps up this rate, it will hit over 4,400 flights by the end of the year, around 800 more than its record-breaking 2024. Hegseth's warning is becoming clearer. Taiwan, the US, and the many nations in the Indo-Pacific that are wary of China's growing military power can't take these warnings lightly. China is ramping up the pressure. Those flights are being carried out before to build tension in Taiwan and to showcase the sheer might of the PLA's air force. The April 1st operation, beyond being a threat and a propaganda exercise, also showcases the encircling strategy China intends to use when it invades Taiwan. And it's not like China has been slowing down in May. According to the Eurasian Times, the month preceding Hegseth's comments was marked by more training drills and encroachment onto Taiwanese territory. Between May 1st and May 27th, Taiwan says it detected up to 70 Chinese ships, many of which were Navy vessels sailing from the Yellow Sea into the South China Sea. On May 19th alone, Taiwan detected 30 ships with no names, documentation, or ports of registry sailing through the Taiwan Strait, a move that shows China is deliberately trying to harass Taiwan. Taiwan's defense ministry also says that China sent 75 aircraft into Taiwan's airspace during this period, with those aircraft taking part in a trio of combat readiness patrols, threats upon threats. And therein lies the point that Hegseth is making. China has always attempted to use its growing military might to intimidate Taiwan. We see that from the Janes figures, showcasing how many Chinese aircraft have entered Taiwan's airspace over the last 4 years. But there's something different about 2025. The drills are getting larger, more organized. The threats that came alongside those drills have grown more pronounced, suggesting that Hegseth may not be lying, as China claims he is, when he says that an invasion is imminent. We also can't ignore China's artificial islands. For the last few years, China has been building new islands in the South China Sea that it's using to prove its claims that it should own almost the entire waterway. As far back as March 2022, AP News was reporting that China has militarized at least 3 of these islands, equipping them with laser and jamming equipment, fighter jets, and anti-aircraft missiles. Former US Indo-Pacific Commander Admiral John C. Aquilino warned at the time that these island buildups were just more examples of China attempting to showcase its military strength. "I think over the past 20 years we've witnessed the largest military buildup since World War II by the PRC," Aquilino told the AP. "They have advanced all their capabilities, and that buildup of weaponization is destabilizing the region." Geopolitically, China is using its man-made islands to enhance the many territorial claims it makes in the South China Sea. But don't ignore the fact these islands are now militarized. It's possible that China may be planning on using them as launching points for aerial assaults against Taiwan, or failing that, as part of the barricade it intends to build around Taiwan when it finally invades. The islands are all about control, and that's precisely what China aims to exert over Taiwan imminently, according to Hegseth. Following on from Hegseth's stark warning comes the obvious question: what is Taiwan doing to prepare itself? NBC News saw that a race to overhaul its defenses is already underway. Mandatory military service and reservist training have been extended, it says. Focus Taiwan says that the extension was made official back in January 2024 and has led to the number of conscripts being brought into Taiwan's new military service program rising by 41% in 2025 alone. So Taiwan is preparing on the manpower front to build an army that may be capable of defending the island against the 2.035 million active and 510,000 reserve personnel China could bring to bear during an invasion. Still, manpower alone won't save Taiwan. It needs to do more to overhaul its defenses. Defense Blog reports that Taiwan has massively increased its military spending, which has risen to 2.45% of the country's GDP in 2025. That amounts to around $20.5 billion dedicated to defense, the resource says. Key programs Taiwan will invest in, including domestic weapons production and the acquisition of more foreign weapons. Upgrades to existing military equipment are also happening on the island, Defense Blog says. For instance, the older F-16As and F-16Bs in Taiwan's Air Force are being upgraded to the F-16V variant, along with an order being placed for 66 new F-16Vs. First launched in February 2012, the F-16V, also known as the Viper, can reach a top speed of Mach 2 and has a range of 1,740 nautical miles, according to Air Force technology. It uses an active electronically scanned array radar that isn't available in older F-16 models, with Taiwan having already spent $1.85 billion to upgrade 145 of its older F-16s to this new variation. That's money well spent for Taiwan. It intends for its F-16Vs to become the primary counter to the hordes of Chinese J-20 stealth fighters Taiwan expects to face during an invasion. September 2023 also saw Taiwan introduce its first domestically manufactured submarine, the Haikun, and it has dedicated $7.4 billion to expanding domestic missile production. As of 2023, the country was capable of building around 1,000 missiles annually, Defense Blog says, with the lineup including anti-ship and long-range land attack missiles designed to defend against China's forces. The Wall Street Journal says that Taiwan has also crafted a new approach to what Hegseth claims is an imminent invasion. Fear the pain. Writing for the journal, Taiwan-based reporter Zhou Wang points out that Taiwan is unlikely to be ready to repel a full-blown Chinese invasion anytime soon. It especially won't be ready if the rumors that China wants to take the island by 2027 prove to be true. So rather than equipping itself for a conventional war, Wang says, Taiwan is instead investing in asymmetric defenses that will force China into thinking twice before it invades. The idea is simple: inflict as much pain on China's forces as possible, while Taiwan appeals to the US for help. Taiwan is building several layers of coastal defenses, Wang says, which it will use to drastically slow down the amphibious invasion China is planning. Taiwan's Navy is creating a coastal command unit that will focus on defending the Taiwan Strait rather than attempting to control it. The approach has been dubbed the porcupine strategy. The coast, combined with the main Taiwan island itself, will see many points of resistance created that inflict pain on Taiwan's Chinese adversary. Those defenses won't be enough to stop China outright, but that's not the point. Taiwan wants to use its porcupine strategy to sink ships, destroy aircraft, and kill Chinese army members, so it can buy time to work alongside the US to stop a Chinese invasion. Of course, there's a potential hitch in this plan. The porcupine strategy only works if Taiwan is able to convince the United States to get directly involved if China invades. During his speech, Hegseth made it clear that the US intends to support Taiwan and its other Indo-Pacific allies in any way that it can when China makes its move. Taiwan knows how important this support will be. It's already buying plenty of US weapon systems, as we see with the F-16V purchases. Reuters also notes that Taiwan has bought 29 high-mobility artillery rocket systems, or HIMARS, which you may recognize as a weapon that has proven exceptionally effective for Ukraine in its war against Russia. According to NBC, those HIMARS will be key to allowing Taiwan to strike China from beyond the island's coast, offering mobility and precision that could even allow Taiwan to strike China itself. Another report, also published by NBC on May 30th, notes that Taiwan paid $1 billion for its 29 HIMARS, with each being capable of firing guided rockets up to 185 miles. That's far enough to reach the Chinese province of Fujian, which is on the other side of the Taiwan Strait. Beyond that, Taiwanese National Defense Ministry spokesperson Sun Li-Fang also points out that the US and Taiwan are also working together on an intelligence-sharing deal that Sun labels a game-changer. Offering Taiwan's first public comments on the deal, Sun said, "We typically don't go into detail because intelligence and information sharing are sensitive. That said, this kind of intelligence exchange is extremely helpful for us in understanding threats from the enemy and making appropriate defensive deployments." Perhaps this is a sign that the US and Taiwan are cooperating on the porcupine strategy already. Still, Taiwan also knows that there's plenty of potential that the US won't come roaring to the island's aid in the event of an invasion. After all, it was only in July 2024 that then presidential candidate Donald Trump was calling the US's support of Taiwan into question. In that month, Trump was asked if the US would come to Taiwan's aid if China invaded. He responded that the US was no different than an insurance company when it came to Taiwan, which Trump also said doesn't give us anything. Trump also suggested that he wouldn't feel too secure if I was Taiwan, while claiming that the island has taken almost 100% of the US semiconductor industry. Of course, those comments came almost a year ago. Given Hegseth's remarks in Singapore, Trump may have changed his tune. Still, comments like these are still enough for Taiwan to question just how committed the US is to providing it with direct help should the imminent Chinese invasion happen. AP News also highlights that despite Hegseth's claims, the US has recently pulled military resources out of the Indo-Pacific to aid in its campaigns in Europe and the Middle East. For instance, the US shipped a Patriot missile defense battalion from the Indo-Pacific to the Middle East a couple of months ago, requiring 73 military cargo aircraft to get the job done. That's an aerial defense system on which Taiwan can no longer rely and would clearly take an extensive effort to bring back to the Indo-Pacific if China invaded. At the time, Hegseth wouldn't answer any questions about why the US pulled such an important defensive system out of the Indo-Pacific. Instead, he preferred to focus on US partnerships in the region, stating, "Ultimately, a strong, resolute, and capable network of allies and partners is our strategic advantage. China envies what we have together, and it sees what we can collectively bring to bear on defense, but it's up to all of us to ensure that we live up to that potential by investing." There's no confirmation of direct US intervention in those words, though there is also no denial. It appears that the US is playing its cards close to its chest. Taiwan, in the meantime, is doing everything it can to be ready if Hegseth's words come to pass and the imminent Chinese invasion of the island actually happens. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to The Military Show for more video commentaries on the latest developments in the Indo-Pacific. Also, check out our video covering the dark truth of why China sent warships to Australia to learn how Taiwan isn't the only territory on which Beijing has its eyes.